So hello, my name is Mark Lawrence. I'm the Communications Manager at the Housing Ombudsman, and I'll be kind of chairing today's session. We're going to be joined by, as you can see from the other spotlight, Andrea Kenoy and also Richard Blakeway, who will do some little introductions to themselves in a little bit, but just wanted to go through some initial housekeeping, and then we'll get into those questions. So you'll be able to see kind of some of the slides on there, but I just wanted to say welcome to your first resident panel event, and welcome back to those who had been on the panel last time and have reapplied. So thank you very much for that. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that put forward questions for this session. We've got lots and lots to try and get through. So as I say, I'm not going to try and talk for too long before we kick off. Firstly, as I say, you'll see that you're all on mute. So please do use the chat function, but the reason we do it is just so that everyone has a good opportunity to hear the answers from the Ombudsman, and kind of it just makes it a little easier for us to get through those questions. We will be doing some polls, so it will be great to get your involvement in those. So please do take part in those. And any questions that we can't answer this evening that you did pre-submit, we will provide full responses to in a roundup email over the next few weeks. Unfortunately, due to the election, we are unable to answer some questions until after the 4th of July. So for those questions, we will be kind of leaving those responses until after that. So please do bear with us while that, but we are going to try and answer as many as possible regardless. Also, just a really quick reminder that we have previously sent you an acceptable users guide, and we expect that this is followed through panel meetings. So please do make sure that any comments in the chat and any kind of interactions with the panel are kept respectful and adhere to this document. If you need it sent round again, we will do that in future mailings. So onto the panel meeting today, and a few of you have asked about incentives for joining the panel. So I just wanted to kind of go through a couple of little bits there, and then I'm going to pass to Richard and Andrea. Unfortunately, it's not a paid role and we don't offer any expenses, but it does give you an opportunity to help us improve our services, improve landlord services, but most importantly, improve other residents' lives. But what it does mean is that it will not impact on your benefits or your pension credits. I know we've had a couple of questions about that. Yeah, please do not worry about that. But if you do have any other questions, please do email the resident panel email address at the end if you are concerned about anything along those lines. This type of Meet the Ombudsman Q&A style session will be run periodically throughout the 3 years that you're on the panel, but we will engage with you through a variety of other means, such as special interest discussions, being part of our corporate plan consultation, and much more kind of besides that. So there's going to be lots and lots of opportunity for you to get involved, and we really appreciate some of the great suggestions that we've had through the submitted questions. So someone had put forward maybe an in-person meeting, round table type style with some senior housing staff, which we can definitely explore, and we will look at kind of any other ways that we can improve engagement and improve services. Finally, some of you have asked about what you can and cannot share with residents and your landlord, and we're really happy for you to discuss and spread the word of the Ombudsman and what you're doing on this panel with both residents and your landlord. There are absolutely no restrictions. And your landlord will not act negatively towards you due to being on this panel. We're really kind of committed to that, and we do not feel that that has ever happened before, and it will not happen whilst you're on this panel either. And finally, we won't publish your name publicly anywhere on our website about being associated with this panel. Like, we have your information, but we will not share it with anyone. We will not share it with any landlords either. That is all of the kind of random questions that we got, admin kind of questions. So without further ado, I would like to now introduce you to Richard Blakeway and Kenoy, who is the Ombudsman's Chief Operating Officer. And I'm going to pass to them now just for a couple of minutes each to just do a bit of an intro.
Cool, thanks, Mark. If I kick off, just a massive thank you to everyone for joining the panel and joining us this evening. The panel is one of the most important ways in which we can engage with residents, not only on individual complaints, but on our work as an organisation. It's fantastic, as we've seen in the chat, to see the breadth of experience that's coming to the Ombudsman services panel. It's fantastic to see people up and down the country from different parts of the country and with different landlords. There's at least one person who lives local to me, I saw from the chat. So I look forward to seeing you as I walk the dog around the neighbourhood. I think on this panel, you are bringing a voice for residents, as well as a voice, from your own experiences. You're bringing a voice for residents. You're bringing your experience, you're bringing your knowledge, and you're bringing your ideas. And that is rich intelligence for us to inform how we work as a service and how we ensure that there is fairness in the housing sector. And also, I do think, and it touches on one of the points that Mark was touching on, it's brilliant. You don't have to do this. Obviously, it's brilliant if you're able to engage with your landlord, engage with your neighbours, engage with your communities about the work of the Ombudsman. You don't have to do it, but any conversation that you have with anyone that means that if they ever need the Ombudsman service, are more likely to know about it, that is amazing. And and so please do feel empowered to be a voice in your landlord, in your neighbourhood, for people's right to redress. Andrea.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining us this evening. So I suppose the only thing I would add to what's been said already is just to underline the point that the panel really does have real impact for us here at the Ombudsman. The previous incarnation we consulted around, how to improve access to the service on our complaint handling code that has now become statutory and all landlords have to follow, on some recommendations that we make on our spotlight reports that take a particular complaint theme, and those recommendations we ask landlords to self-assess against. So, real impact. We really listen to what you say. It makes a real difference to our work, and really helps just to improve the experience for residents more broadly, and also helps improve landlord services as well. So keep up the good work in this new expanded iteration of our resident panel.
Absolutely. 1,500 people. I saw the question come up in the chat. So 1,500 residents. Over to you, Mark, which is amazing. Right, Mark, let's get going.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much, both. And great to see so many people from different corners of the country. The first question, and George, who's in the chat, has posted about this already, but it came up in quite a few different questions. So I've grouped them together, George. I hope you don't mind, but I have used kind of some of the elements from your question, and it's around those residents with disabilities. And people have said that having a disability can make it challenging to clearly explain complex housing issues in writing within a set time frame. Does the Housing Ombudsman Service offer alternative ways to present evidence and complaints, such as face-to-face meetings, conference calls, or the ability to submit voice notes alongside documents? And supplementary to that is, what else does it do on reasonable adjustments?
Okay, I'm going to pick this one up. You'll find Rick and I kind of switching between each other for answers to these questions. So on this one, I think this touches on two really important aspects of what an Ombudsman service is and how it works, and how it is different to maybe other forms of redress, for example, through the courts. So the first thing is around, it's really the way that we operate is to redress that imbalance of power that there can be between a landlord and a resident. And that also includes where, residents may have some disabilities, things that make it difficult for them to engage with services in kind of trying to take their complaint forward. So yeah, what we do in our approach is place far fewer requirements on the resident to actually prove their case. It's the landlord we focus on, and the expectation is that from what the resident has told us, the landlord has to provide us with the evidence that shows what actually happened during the period that the complaint was over, or in relation to the complaint as well. So I think that kind of minimises the expectations on residents to be providing lots and lots of information. And then the other really, really important thing around Ombudsman is that we are accessible. We make our services as accessible as possible to absolutely everybody. We want people to come to us and make it a really easy process for people to follow that is customer centered as well. So yeah, when someone does come to us as well, not only do we not request lots of evidence from you, but we will engage with you. We will ask if there's any adjustments that you need, and we will do, what people require in order to help you access our service and progress your complaint through. So I hope that's reassuring for you.
Thank you, Andrea. And I say a few people did have questions along this line. So if you did have anything to follow up, please do put it in the chat, and we will kind of be able to follow up with some of that. I can see a couple of people have said that they can't hear anything. If you want to just leave the call and then join back in again, it should work. Sometimes Zoom just goes a bit funny, so apologies for that. But if you leave and join back in, you should be able to hear us. I think the other thing is that someone has asked about slides and recordings and notes from this session. Yeah, we will be providing full notes and a recording of the session afterwards. So yeah, please do not worry about having to take notes yourself, because we will provide that after this session. The second question that we have was from Dana, who has said, why can't my landlord just evict someone who's causing antisocial behaviour?
Thanks, Dana. Dana, thanks for your question. So you know what, antisocial behaviour or complaints about neighbours' behaviour or antisocial behaviour is the second largest group of complaints we receive as a service, and the key thing here for us when we're handling those complaints, and for landlords when they're handling these complaints, is to be really clear about their responsibility as a landlord, as against any responsibility that the police or other agencies may have. So the lens we apply is the landlord doing what it should be doing as a management body? And they should have strong policies around antisocial behaviour, around neighbourhoods, to make sure that they're ensuring that everyone can enjoy their home, enjoy their community. Now, clearly, the evidence in some cases might lead a landlord to say to establish that someone is not that a tenant or a resident is not fulfilling their obligations under that tenancy, and therefore, as a last resort, I suspect, they may seek to evict that resident, and that does happen. But often I think it's a last resort. Often it will involve a legal process, and often the courts will expect quite a high threshold to be met, quite a high burden of evidence for that to happen. And I think part of the work of an ombudsman and a requirement on landlords when it comes to engaging with complaints is to think about, well, look, how can we avoid that happening? Because that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen quickly, and there will inevitably be many missed opportunities to resolve the issue without necessarily evicting someone. And I think our casework often points to what landlords could do to resolve issues earlier, to potentially mediate between parties, or to make sure that that residents are, as I say, fulfilling their tenancy obligations. In the autumn, we'll be doing a big focus. In November, we'll be doing a big focus on antisocial behaviour and the lessons from our complaints. And that's a report we're going to publish and we can share with everyone on the panel. So you can see the work that we do, but also the lessons that come from our cases on ESB.
Thank you very much, Rick, for that. I'm just going to try the first poll, and some of the feedback that we've got around ASB is that they're not always 100% sure how to actually report the issue to their landlord. So hopefully this works and everyone can take part in this. So I will launch it now, and it should just pop up on your screen, hopefully, and see. Hopefully that's all there for everyone to respond to. Yeah, I can see some numbers coming in now. We'll just run this for 30 odd seconds or until everyone's done it. Flying up with numbers, so that's really good. So most of you at the moment say that you are aware of how to report it, which is fantastic. I mean, we find a lot of people are struggling with that from some of the evidence we've also seen. Just keep it open for a couple more seconds. Someone said it's getting a response, that's the issue. Fair enough. Okay, I will end that poll there. Thank you everyone for taking part in that. Really useful. Thank you for that. The next question is from Saida, who said, what actions can the Ombudsman take against a landlord that is continuously failing?
Yeah, thanks, Saida, for that question. So this is something that we've thought a lot about in recent years, and we've got new powers. So that means we can do more when we're seeing the same problems time and time again. I'm afraid that does happen, particularly with some landlords. So what do? I think the first thing is we want to be much more open and transparent with the information that we have on landlord performance. So every year we publish an annual complaints review. Every year where we have made 5 or more findings in relation to a landlord, we will publish a landlord performance report that will show you that landlord, what complaints we've received, what they're about, and what we've found, and how that compares to their performance last year, but also their performance compared to similar landlords, either in terms of the geography or the size or the type of landlord, whether it's a council or housing association, wherever it is. So I think that transparency is empowering is information which goes to the regulator. And so the regulator's got its own work which it can do. It's information that goes to residents. So residents, particularly if they're on a scrutiny panel or something, has that information. But it's also crucially information that goes to the landlord itself. It goes to the board. It goes to their member responsible for complaints, which is now a board member under the code that has to oversee the complaints and handling in the landlord. And it goes to the directors, the chief executive and the senior leadership. So that means that they're really clear on what we're seeing and where they might need to make improvements, and they're making those improvements. But that's not the only thing that we'll do. So if we're seeing repeated issues in the cases that we handle, there's a few things which we might do. So with some landlords, we'll make an order in an individual case for them to review other cases that are similar, or review their policy or process in relation to the issues that we're seeing. Handling of leaks, for example, damp and mold, antisocial behaviour, something like that. And they have to undertake a review. Sometimes we'll say that review has to be done independent of them, and we'll publish the report, and it will set out very clearly the actions that they need to take to see whether there's improvement. So that's one intervention. Sometimes what we might do is do a further investigation. We've done this in relation to a number of landlords now, and you can see the reports on our website. So the last report that we did was in relation to southern housing. But we've done reports on London and Quadrant, on Clarion, on Birmingham Council, on Haringey, on Islington, lots of different landlords. And you can look at those and those reports. What they seek to do over several months is group together all of the cases that we handle and set out very clearly the themes that we see. And we'll say to the landlords, these are the issues. What have you done about them? And then we'll set out what the landlord has done and whether that's worked or not in the time that we've been looking at it. And then we'll say these are the gaps, or this is where you need to go further. And then we'll see the landlord will have to engage with us to show us that they're responding and acting on those themes and those lessons, whether that's improving the way in which they handle complaints, whether that is improving the way in which they deal with repairs or the failings that we've seen in repairs, wherever it is. And then the third thing that we might do, and we've done this in relation, for example, to Lambeth Council, is if we do all of that and we're still seeing issues, then we do have a power to inspect. Now, this is different to the inspection that a regulator might do, but the way that we've done it is that we've engaged directly with those staff. In that case, we talked to all of the staff working in complaints and said, we keep seeing stuff. Why? Why do you think this keeps happening? And so we talk to the landlord, and again, we evaluate, well, why are we seeing the same issue? What needs to change to prevent it? And obviously, we'll see in time, through complaints that we see in the future, whether a difference is happening or not. So I think and then if we need to do more, we can do. So that's some of the ways in which we do it. We're not a regulator, so we don't have the powers to, change the board. We don't have the power to issue a regulatory fine or a penalty, but we can do things which are often is just reflecting that mirror back to the landlord, saying, look, we can see these themes. What are you doing about them? And trying to encourage them to change and improve. And that's the space we're in. And we are seeing a difference happening.
Thank you, Rick, for that. Just seeing a few people saying that there's a lot of chat going on, and yes, thank you so much for kind of your enthusiasm. If you don't want to see it, you can just click off the chat so that it's kind of just running in the background and you're not kind of distracted by it. So do appreciate that. Yeah, there's a lot of questions and a lot of chat. So yeah, if you can close the chat down, if you go along the bottom, you can click that chat button and it will disappear for you as well. There is also a button on here about kind of stopping the chat preview, but hopefully that won't be too bad for you. The next question is from Deborah Curran, who's asked, what can the Ombudsman do about landlords that lie and say that they've complied with their orders when they haven't complied with those orders?
Hey, I'm taking this one. Thank you for the question, Deborah. So, I mean, this also gets to the heart of our approach to dispute resolution. As an ombudsman, we have kind of three principles that we use when we look at complaints, and a key one of those is put things right. So, when we do an investigation, at the end of it, if we find the landlord didn't do everything we should have done, we will then make orders that will remedy the situation for the resident. And as Rick just said as well, sometimes we can make orders that go beyond that as well to kind of extend fairness and prevent the same issue happening for other residents as well. And just for context as well, I mean, last year we made over 22,000 either orders that a landlord had to follow or recommendations that we thought they should follow through our casework. And that's an awful lot. That's 3 times more than we did in the previous year. But in putting things right, it's absolutely, well, it's fundamental that we need to, not just issue the orders, but follow them up and make sure that they are delivered, that the landlord is complying with them, because otherwise that's not a kind of, the dispute is not resolved otherwise. So we have a compliance process where we check and ask the landlords for evidence that they have done what we have ordered them to do in our reports. And our adjudicators and caseworkers are really passionate about this, and they will be really, really tenacious in asking the landlord for evidence and following up and just making sure that really what we've asked to happen has actually happened. The compensation's been paid, there's been a change in the policy, the repair has been done that was promised. So I would hope, examples of the landlord not delivering orders are very, very few and far between. We do track these as well. We report on them in our annual report, and we get really, really, really high rates of compliance. And they are done, within the timescales that we set most of the time as well. But, if something isn't delivered as well, we have an additional power as well. We can name and produce a report that will effectively name and shame the landlord for not delivering what we've asked them to do, either not delivering it at all or not delivering it within a reasonable timescale. And we have used that power in the past as well.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be some few questions and as a follow-up, but you want to say anyone that has got questions, we will be following up after the session. So don't worry if you haven't got a response in this session, we will be kind of getting to those questions afterwards. So please do carry on sending them in. Really do appreciate it. The next question is from David Roberts, and it's about what is a reasonable time frame for landlords to respond to damp and mold in? Seen a few damp and mold questions on the chat as well. So
yeah, thanks, David. Look, this has been a huge issue in the sector, and it's one which we have sought to really bring a focus on through the work that we do and the complaints that we handle. And we've obviously seen a dramatic increase in the complaints that we see around damp and mold. If you're not aware, a few years ago, we published a report which was called It's Not Lifestyle, and it focused on damp and mold. And what we said within that report is the landlord should treat damp and mold with zero tolerance. They should be proactive, they should act with urgency. And one of the recommendations that we made in that report, and it's one which we know many landlords have taken up, is to set out a specific strategy for dealing with damp and mold. And that includes timescales for when they would deal with different issues. Now, the thing about damp and mold, as folk will know, is it's a symptom. So the first thing is to establish what is the cause, and then depending on the cause, you know that might lead to different timeframes to deal with it. So, for example, is the issue a leak that needs to be fixed, or is the issue ventilation and dealing with the ventilation? So that will often then intersect with the repairs policy that landlord has. And different landlords will set out different timescales for dealing with repairs, but sometimes it might be urgent and dealt with within hours or days. Sometimes it might be a routine repair, and that might be dealt with within days or weeks. And so when we're assessing cases, we'll look at the landlord's approach on damp and mold. We'll look at the commitments within their repairs policy, if it is a repair that is related to the damp and mold, and we will assess their actions within those time frames. Now, the thing that could change all of this, that's an improvement, definitely, but the thing that could change all of this is something called AWAB's law. This is a provision that was introduced in legislation by Parliament last year following the death of Awab Ishaq in Rochdale and the coroner's inquest, which said that the cause of his death directly related to damp and mold. Now, before the general election, there was a consultation that set out timescales for dealing with issues under Awab's law, not exclusively damp and mold, but it related to what are called the hazards in housing. So that's a whole range of different issues, but does include issues like damp and mold. That was a consultation run by the government, where obviously now there's a general election. We need to see what happens after the general election. But clearly the intention that Parliament brought in through Awab's law is that there would be timescales, and those timescales would be national, they'd be universal. So we move beyond landlords doing it through their own strategy, through their own repairs policy, to a national framework with prescribed timescales. And we need to see what happens after the election.
Thank you very much. We've got a second poll of the evening to send through now, and what we're going to ask is whether you have seen your landlord's approach to damp and mold change over the past year. What we've seen is that this has happened in the past, and so it's really interested to see kind of what your thoughts are on how your landlord has approached damp and mold, and whether this has actually changed in that past year. Hopefully it's all popped up for someone. Someone's just said it's not working for them, but hopefully it's now on the screen. Very even split at the moment, 52-48, 51-49. Very even split. Someone's just asked if we can see the results of the poll. We will put those in the follow-up notes that we produce. So currently it's on. So have you seen a change in your landlord's approach to damp and mold in the past year? A yes is 47%, no is 43%. So very interesting. It seems to be quite split, but mostly no, or majority no in the end. Right, that's given everyone a minute. I think we'll end that poll there. But thank you very much for taking the time to do that, and say we'll kind of continue to use that poll information, but also put those in the notes as well. The next question didn't have a name next to it, but it's what can be done against landlords that don't treat residents with the respect that they deserve throughout a complaint or in general at all. So what can be done about that respect relationship?
Thanks, Mark. I'll take this one. And just on the damp and mold poll, I mean, rest assured, we are not going to stop advocating for change on the handling of damp and mold, and there's a much more that we can do in this space and need to do. On lack of respect for residents, we do see some communication which is respectful, empathetic, and is much better than it used to be in the complaints process. But too often we do see poor communication or a lack of respect. We did a report on this at the end of January. We had about 1,500, about 1,500 residents, I think, respond to, and others respond to a call for evidence we did around this. And our report is about, it's called Relationship of Equals, and it's about respect and attitudes. And it puts, I think, into sharp relief. There's some really powerful case studies in there from our casework, some really powerful quotes from residents about their experiences. And it just shows that at the heart of this, there's still a long way to go to change the culture, to avoid stigma, to ensure that people are treated with respect. And the complaints process needs to embody that, cultural change and change in behaviours. What can we do about it? Well, we've done that report. We've made a lot of recommendations. We're bringing a spotlight on it. But when we see it in an individual case, we'll call it out and we'll be really clear. Look, this wasn't right. And then we'll look at, well, what needs to happen to change it? We'll make sure the board sees it. We'll make sure of that landlord sees it, or the governing body. It might be councillors, it might be a board. And sometimes we'll say, look, staff need to be trained, for example, or you need to do things which can change it. That's not going to be, it's not going to address it overnight. But I think the first and most important thing we can do is call it out.
Thank you very much. I realise we've only got just over 20 minutes, so I'm going to go a little bit faster through the questions, if that's all right. I always do this. We get to a little bit of a stage where we need to hurry up. So there's a few questions on new powers, what new powers we have, and how we're enforcing those powers and how we've adapted to having those new powers.
So this is me. So new powers, the answer is, well, we've got quite a few. And I will be quick, Mark, I've taken the hint. So the first of these, I kind of mentioned our complaint handling code is something that the resident panels previously helped us with. The first of the powers and new powers we've got was the ability to put that on a statutory footing. So we now have a code that just ends the postcodes lottery for all residents, and landlords have to follow it. So a resident in one landlord can expect the complaint to be handled in exactly the same way, follow the same process, the same timescales, have the same amount of communication and sort of level of response back from their landlord as any other resident that is subject to our scheme. So making that statutory as well was a really important leap forward. It kind of elevated the status of the code. And then alongside that, we now have as well a duty to monitor landlords' compliance with that code. So we're developing this at the moment, and we are going to deliver that in a number of different ways. So we are going to look at how landlords themselves assure themselves that they've complied with the code. And we want to look at what kind of information they've given to their board on following the provisions in the code, the kind of number of complaints they've had, how quickly they've resolved them. We will also, though, not just take the landlord's word for it, but also use our own complaints data, insights we get from other sources, and an absence of data as well, because sometimes complaints not coming through can actually indicate there is an issue with access to our service. So we will be looking at, well, actually, what does the landlord's complaints policy say? Is it saying the right things? And is the landlord's complaint handling process actually working in practice as well? And then in addition to that, I mentioned earlier, another new power was around the ability to issue what we call wider orders. So that's not just looking at the individual or remedying for an individual resident, but making sure that the same issues don't repeat for other residents. And then the final thing we can do now as well is issue good practice to the sector. So this is more in the area of service provision to say, this is a way we would expect you to deliver your service. And damp and mold could be one of a sort of example of that, where we can sort of issue what we think a good way of dealing with those kind of complaints are. And we can also ask landlords to complete a self-assessment against those recommendations as well, that we can then look at both in individual cases that come through to assess how the landlord service is provided. And we can also then take it into, if we do decide to go down the route, some of those investigations into a landlord itself. So Rick gave the examples of the ones we've done in Islington and Clarion and Lambeth as well. So in a nutshell, that's our new powers.
Fantastic, thank you. And a couple of people have requested that they can see the code and some of the new powers. And what we'll do is in the follow-up email, again, we will kind of share the links to those, and we will include some of the frequently asked questions that we've had from other residents as well, which might help you just kind of like understand some of the different elements and having hopefully some of the your questions answered on those. But thank you, Andrea, for that overview on the new powers. Linking to one of the topics we talked about earlier with the special investigation reports, how do we make the decisions on what reports we write? For example, the spotlights or special investigation reports into those specific landlords. I know you've kind of slightly touched on the one of them, but how do we maybe pick the themes for our thematic reports?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So on the individual landlords, it will obviously depend on our casework, either an individual case that triggers it or a trend that we see in our casework. We're upholding more complaints or receiving more complaints, or we have an absence of complaints. So So that's around an individual landlord. On the themes that we do in the sector, again, it's based on the analysis of our casework. So where are we seeing, a trend in our casework that we want to investigate further, or where are we seeing a particular practice that is common across lots of landlords that we think is not appropriate. So to give you an example, when we did our noise report, what we were seeing was noise transference being dealt with as antisocial behaviour, when actually it might be an issue to do with the building transferring noise, and really distinguishing between that. Sometimes we might do it because we know it's a moment in time when there needs to be a real focus. So, for example, we did a report on cladding related complaints, and that was because all the issues that were happening around building safety, and doing that report at that moment in time was the right thing. We didn't have a vast number of complaints, but it was clearly an important moment to bring focus on that. So that can be either because of something that's happening where we know that change is coming about and there needs to be a focus in it, or we can see repeated and poor practice, potentially, or contentious practice in the sector. And if possible, for people to tell us if they think that we should look at a particular issue or a particular theme, and I'd encourage you to do that. You can suggest to us areas for us to consider.
Absolutely, thank you, Rick. And yeah, we will be using kind of the panel as a way of seeing what is important to you for us to look at. So we will definitely be sending out kind of surveys and asking for your ideas on that. So yeah, please do respond when those come around. I've just seen a couple of people saying about different questions and making sure that we've definitely seen. Don't worry, the chat gets saved afterwards, so everything that you've put in there will be put into a document that we can then share afterwards. So don't worry if someone hasn't responded to it from the Ombudsman just yet. Rest assured, everything will be through there. The next question is from Marjorie, who's asked, what are we doing to speed up our investigations, and are we able to provide some timescales around communicating during a case?
Hi, Marjorie. So yeah, this is a good question. And, to be perfectly honest, I will say our timescales at the moment on our investigations are not where we want them to be. They are taking longer than we would like. And the reason for that is over the last 3 financial years, the volume of complaints coming to us has been unprecedented compared to previous years. The level of growth in demand has just significantly increased every single year for the last 3 years. And that has proved a challenge for us to respond to. So what we've been doing is bringing in extra staff, lots of extra staff to help us get through all of those cases. But caseworkers that can look at the housing complaints that we have the kind of skills, the knowledge, the experience to actually investigate those, to really get to the root cause of the issue, to come up with findings about what's gone wrong, the right remedies that will kind of put things right, and to help the landlord kind of learn from those complaints. That takes a little bit of time and practice and experience and expertise and training for caseworkers to get to the point where they're really effective at doing that. So over the last few years, we have grown from a service of around 80 people in total to now over 400. And that's a really significant expansion of our headcount, matching the significant impact or increase in demand that we've had. So we are now much better placed to respond. We doubled our output last year. A massive step change in what we delivered compared to previous years. And at the moment, we are kind of delivering around 600 determinations, investigations into cases every month, which is, record levels for our organisation, and was about half a year's output from about 4 or 5 years ago. We are going to continue to recruit this year. And we're also really challenging ourselves around how we do our determinations as well, to make the process as efficient as possible. And all of those things will contribute to speeding up how quickly you would get an investigation back when it comes to us. So we do have some targets in our business plan around this, around how quickly we deal with cases. They are focused both on high-risk cases, so ones where there is a really serious issue outstanding that could affect or bring, quite significant detriment, impacts on the resident or their family in the home. Those are, 95% of cases, those cases will be delivered within 6 months. And we've also got targets around other cases and how quickly we will do them, the proportion we will do within 6 and 12 months as well. But a really key thing here as well that we are working on and improving as well is, while people are waiting for their case to be looked at by us, is that we need to be communicating with you regularly throughout that process, explaining to you where you are at, what the next stage is, and when you can expect that to happen. So we've got better at that over the last 6 months, I would say, really keeping people informed. And the Director of Dispute and Resolution, who's in charge of this, is bringing in lots of or further processes to just kind of make sure we are communicating effectively. So people coming to us now should receive a phone call rather than an email that really sets out clearly where you are, what the next steps are, and how long you can, when you can expect to reach that next step as well. So we are improving. We're not by any means complacent about where we are, but expect to see some real progress this year.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I really appreciate that answer. I think linking to that is the next question from Jacqueline, who's asked about, are there more measures that can be put in place to ensure that complaints can be resolved before it gets to the Ombudsman? And if not, are there more measures the Ombudsman can ensure that complaints are resolved without residents coming forwards again with further complaints?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. And yeah, obviously resolving things with the landlord reduces the number of complaints coming to us. But also, I mean, there's not just a benefit for us in terms of demand, but for residents and landlords, it kind of maintains the trust in the relationship. And that's where we want things to be resolved. And it's the most effective and timely way of getting an issue sorted out. So, I mean, the main measure that we have here is the complaint handling code that I spoke about earlier. That really sets out how we expect a landlord to deal with a complaint that comes to them, how they should be fair in their assessment of that complaint, how they should put it right, and then learn from the outcomes of those complaints as well. Look back at their processes or their training or their systems and see if there's a repeated pattern that they should make some adjustments and changes to actually be more effective in what they're doing through their complaint handling or through their service delivery as well.
Thank you. What are we doing? And this is a question from a few people about what are we doing in general to improve landlords' complaint handling?
So we have the code, as I've said. One thing that I haven't mentioned so far as well is if residents are struggling to get through their landlord's complaints process, if the landlord isn't recognising the complaint or it's not dealing with it quickly, what residents can do is come to us and we will pick that up on their behalf with the resident, with the landlord, to say, you need to recognise this complaint, you need to progress it through your system. If landlords don't do that, one thing we can do is issue what we call a complaint handling failure order. And what we do is we publish all of those that we issue every quarter in a complaint handling failure order report. So that kind of transparency that we bring in this area does help to improve landlords' complaint handling. They do not like the kind of sort of reputational challenges that it brings to be sort of named in a report like that. So that's one thing that we are doing as a bit of a stick for improvement. The other thing though we do as well is we have a what we call our Centre for Learning, available on our website, that all landlords can access. And there's a whole range of learning tools on there for landlords that, and provided through various different formats as well. So webinars and e-learning and videos to watch as well, for landlords to go on to try to see, well, what else can we do to improve the way we deliver our services to residents.
Thank you very much. I can see we're quite close for time, so I'll try and fit in as many more questions as I can. On this one, similar to maybe one that we had before, but what is a reasonable time frame for repairs by a landlord? So maybe away from damp and mold, but more just repairs. And what can the Ombudsman do to enforce better repairs timescales?
So half the complaints we get are about the property's condition. They're about repairs. And in the 4 years that I've been here, there are 3 landlords, big landlords, where we've done investigations and they don't have a repairs policy. So they have no timescales for doing repairs in. I presume they do it on a case-by-case basis, and that's utterly unsustainable. So I think whatever the timescales are, the first thing is that we are being really clear with landlords that they need to set out how they will handle repairs and in what time frame. I think there is a mixed bag across landlords of what those timescales are. But broadly speaking, I typically see landlords split a repair into kind of 3 groups: kind of emergency, urgent, or routine. There'll also be planned maintenance, planned repairs, but that's kind of separate. And I think and the timescales will vary. That categorization will vary. The timescales will vary, but typically you're seeing a few hours to a few days or weeks for routine. Now the thing is, however it's categorized, we know from the complaints that we see that so often complaints or repairs are not done within those timescales. And so the thing which we're trying to do is get under the skin of it. Well, why is this happening? And there'll be a number of different reasons. Sometimes it's because the repair is not categorized correctly between sort of urgent or routine or whatever. Sometimes the diagnosis of the repair is not correct. And sometimes the repair is complex, and that bears some consideration. So for example, it might be a leak coming from a property which is a leaseholder, and the responsibilities of the leaseholder versus the landlord and all of that stuff. But more typically, the wrong skills, the wrong materials, missed appointments, records not being kept up to date. So people think a repair has been done when it hasn't actually been done, and no one knows that because the records don't tell them. These are the reasons why repair services are not as good as they need to be. A lack of skills, a lack of materials, and then a degree of incompetence in the way in which it's handled. So those are clear messages we're getting across to landlords in our casework. So I think whatever the timescales are, they're really, really important. But the fact is that too many landlords are not dealing with repairs in the timescales that they've set out themselves, and they need to really address the reasons why.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put in another poll now, and it's a "you said, we did" type moment, because I've seen in the chat that you've said I didn't give you a third option. So on this poll, I've given you a third option and launching it now. And this is one thing that we've seen quite a lot recently around claims management companies or no-win, no-fee solicitors around disrepair in your home. And we've seen that there's been a lot of adverts, or if you've been contacted by, I know that we have a lot as well. So just be really interesting to kind of see your thoughts on whether you have had or seen an advert or have been contacted by. We can probably do a little bit more work around this further down. Someone's just put they get hounded by them. Yeah, a scam, yeah, con scams. No, absolutely, that's what we are routinely finding. We're getting residents come to us saying that as well. Just leave it a little bit longer for some people. Just there's still a couple of people filling it out. Thank you very much. So what I would say is that it's 71% have said yes, that they have seen something, 26% say no, and then 3% have said that they're unsure. So I'll end that poll there, and thank you very much for filling that in. See a lot of comments about this. Obviously, people quite exercised about, yeah, lots and average one call a week. I mean, yeah, quite significant. I just want to, obviously we've got 2 minutes. Just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for coming. We will, rest assured, we will get to all of the comments and queries within the chat. Yes, we've got lots and lots to do, and I think someone has put in there about kind of some of the this session is quite big. There's a lot of people in it, and that is why these ones will happen periodically, but actually we will be contacting you in the coming months and weeks to kind of look at these, as I kind of mentioned right at the top, the special interest discussions, where we'll get much smaller groups of you together, and we'll really look at issues in more detail, and you guys will be able to have a much better way in to kind of talk to us about some of the issues that are really facing you. And we will be talking about everything from antisocial behavior to our performance to ASB to kind of everything along those lines. So please rest assured that this is just one part of a huge swathe of engagement that we've got planned for you. So please do, not worry about the fact that there's a lot of people, but thank you very much. And a thank you to Rick and Andrea for answering all the questions that we've put to them. And I don't know if Rick, Andrea, you wanted just to say a final goodbye before we wrapped up for this evening.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks,
very
folks.
much. Look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.